precisely 6:45. This is the Sri Lanka Broadcasting Corporation. News edited by Danushka Madhavela and read by Sharifa Tahir. Headlines. Loan lifeline values at 20 billion will be given for small and medium entrepreneurs. 200 electric buses to Western Province. The UNFPA Regional Director is to visit Sri Lanka today. Amendments to Parate execution law is in Parliament soon. Former Finance Minister Ronnie Dimel passes away. Foreign news. NATO allies reject Emmanuel Macron's idea of troops to Ukraine. We move on to local news in detail now. The government has taken measures to implement a 20 billion rupees credit scheme to revive the micro, small and medium enterprise sector in Sri Lanka. Accordingly, the Cabinet Ministers has granted its consent to the proposal forwarded by President Ranil Wickremesinghe in his capacity as the Finance, Economic Stabilisation and National Policies Minister to implement a credit scheme to revive the micro, small and medium enterprise sector. Speaking at the weekly Cabinet media briefing held yesterday at the Government Information Department, Cabinet spokesman, Transport, Highways and Mass Media, Minister Dr. Bandulu Gunawardena said the proposed 20 billion rupees will be spent on the entire project, which has two components. A significant number of small and medium-scale entrepreneurs involved in manufacturing, import, export, tourism, apparel and various other commercial operations have found it very difficult to continue running their enterprises as a result of the economic downturn and the impact of external factors beyond their control. The Asian Development Bank has agreed to provide working capital support for the small and medium enterprise sector as a relief. The proposed program is intended to provide credit facilities to existing micro, small and medium-scale entrepreneurs or other enterprises for further expansion and recovery of their businesses through licensed commercial banks and licensed specialized banks at concessional interest rates. 200 electric buses will be deployed in the Western Province. The number of buses in possession of the Sri Lanka Transport Board is not sufficient. Another 500 buses were deployed under the Indian line of credit. 400 buses have been repaired, while another 500 are to be repaired. Minister Dr. Bandulu Gunawardena disclosed that the Cabinet has green-lighted a proposal to deploy 1,000 new buses across the country. The United Nations Fund for Population Activities, UNFPA, Asia Pacific Region Director Pio Smith is scheduled to visit Sri Lanka today. He will stay in the country until the 1st of March. Issuing a statement, UNFPA Sri Lanka said this visit reaffirms UNFPA's dedication to support Sri Lankan communities, particularly focusing on women, girls, youth and communities, ensuring access to sexual and reproductive health and rights and combating gender-based violence. During his visit, Smith will hold discussions with policymakers, government officials, civil society and key partners to enhance collaboration at the national level and advocate for rights of women and girls. Additionally, he will visit grassroots communities to assess their needs firsthand and identify areas for effective UNFPA support. UNFPA Sri Lanka sustains its enduring collaboration with the Government of Sri Lanka and diverse stakeholders island-wide, driving progress in health, education and gender equality. This is the Sri Lanka Broadcasting Corporation giving you the news. Continuing with more stories here at home. Justice, Prison Affairs and Constitutional Reforms Minister Dr. Vijaydas Rajapaksa yesterday said that steps must be taken to alleviate the challenges associated with Parate execution to prevent crisis for businesses and financial institutions. He said, therefore, plans are underway to propose amendments to Parliament regarding the execution to address their concerns and these concerns. This proposed legislative change signifies a proactive approach towards addressing legal matters crucial for the country's governance and justice system. Furthermore, Minister Dr. Rajapaksa highlighted the anticipation of implementing a distinct loan scheme tailored specifically for small and medium enterprises. This initiative aims to bolster the economic prospects of smaller businesses, contributing to overall economic resilience and growth. Minister Dr. Rajapaksa unveiled these announcements yesterday during a press briefing held at the Presidential Media Centre focused on the pivotal theme of collective path to a stable country. Former Finance Minister Ronnie DeMille has passed away last evening. He was 98 years old and was receiving treatment at a private hospital in Colombo at the time of his demise. Mr. Ronnie DeMille holds the record for the largest number of budgets presented by a finance minister. He was the Minister of Finance from 1977 to 1988 in the United National Party government led by President J.R. Jayawardena. That's local news for the moment.
The main news story is brought to you by Sinhala Vedamahatmya.
Launch of new educational publications designed to provide education about sexuality from early childhood development to the adult community to be launched on the 7th of March. The program is carried out under full supervision and approval of the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Health. Ministry of Education officials stated that arrangements have been made to launch new educational publications compiled to provide education on sexuality from the pre-childhood development stage to the adult community on the 7th of March.
The main news story was brought to you by Sinhala Vedamahatmya.
And on Watch Light, Transport, Highways and Mass Media Minister Dr. Bandara Gunawardena said yesterday that if incidents of assaults and harassment on Sri Lanka transport bus crews by private bus crew are reported, steps will be taken to temporarily cancel the route permits of those private buses. The minister made these remarks after speaking to SLTB employees who are engaged in a protest in front of the Mass Media Ministry against the frequent attacks on SLTB bus drivers and conductors by the employees of the private buses. The minister also, who arrived at the site, discussed with the protesting workers and inquired about their problems.
Coming up, World News.
World News headlines: NATO allies reject Emmanuel Macron's idea of troops to Ukraine. Netanyahu and Biden's power over support for Israel-Gaza war. DNA test confirms the dying man was one of Japan's most wanted, Satoshi Kirishima. World News in detail. Several NATO countries, including the US, Germany and the UK, have ruled out deploying ground troops to Ukraine after French President Emmanuel Macron said nothing should be excluded. Mr. Macron said there was no consensus on sending Western soldiers to Ukraine. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov has warned of direct conflict if NATO troops deploy there. Russian forces have recently made gains in Ukraine, and Kiev has urgently appealed for more weapons. Mr. Macron told a news conference on Monday evening, "We should not exclude that there might be a need for security that then justifies some elements of deployment." The French leader was speaking in Paris, which is hosting a crisis meeting in support of Ukraine, attended by heads of European states as well as the US and Canada. Popular support for Israel in the US will help it fight until total victory over Hamas, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said on Tuesday. In a statement, Mr. Netanyahu cited polls showing that more than 80% of Americans support Israel during the conflict in Gaza. His comments come after US President Joe Biden warned that Israel risks losing global support in the war. US officials say they are working on a possible ceasefire deal. In his statement on Tuesday, Mr. Netanyahu said that since the beginning of the conflict, He has been leading a campaign countering international pressure to end the war ahead of time and mobilize support for Israel. On Monday, Mr. Biden said the U.S. hopes to have a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas in Gaza by next Monday. The U.S. President also suggested later on that Israel could lose support from around the world if it keeps up with this incredibly conservative government they have. Finally, on world news, a DNA test has revealed a dying man who claimed to be one of Japan's most wanted criminals was telling the truth. Satoshi Kirishima made his confession in January, telling police, "I want to meet my death with my real name." Officials have now confirmed the 70-year-old was indeed Kirishima, a member of a militant group behind several deadly bombings in the 1970s. Exactly how he remained at large for so long, despite his face adorning posters across Japan, is unclear. Kirishima is suspected of helping plant and detonate a homemade bomb that destroyed part of a building in Tokyo's Ginza district on 18th April 1975, according to local media. There were no casualties. At the time, he belonged to the East Asia Anti-Japan Armed Front, a radical left-wing organization believed to be behind several bombings against companies in Japan's capital, Tokyo, in the 70s, including one targeting a Mitsubishi Heavy Industries building, which left 8 dead and more than 160 injured. That's on world news. Moving on to development news. The Embassy of Sri Lanka in Jakarta facilitated a virtual meeting between the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce, Sri Lanka Indonesia Business Council of CCC, and the Indonesian Chamber of Commerce and Industry with the objective of fostering trade and investment between the two countries yesterday. The virtual meeting served as a significant platform for fostering dialogue, exploring mutual interests, and strengthening bilateral economic cooperation between Sri Lanka and Indonesia. During the meeting, Chairman of the CCC, Vish Govindasamy, highlighted the commitment of Sri Lanka to foster deep economic collaboration with Indonesia. He expressed a readiness of Sri Lanka to organize a business delegation to Indonesia, emphasizing the country's keen interest in exploring trade and investment opportunities. That's on development news.
Moving on with sports news.
Erling Haaland scored 5 in a stunning display, finishing as old as Manchester City thrashed Luton to reach the FA Cup quarter-finals. It was the Norwegian's 8th hat-trick for City, and he also became the first player to score 5 in a game twice for the club. City opened the scoring in the 4th minute when Kevin De Bruyne, who assisted the first 4 goals, was allowed time and space to cut the ball back for Haaland to convert. The pair combined again 15 minutes later, with Haaland running on to a through ball before powering it past Luton goalkeeper Tim Krul, and it was a similar move that brought the third, only this time with a delicate ding to finish. And that's on sports news.
Go ekak tiyana youth eකට life එකේ change එකට නියමෙට set වෙන්න ඇස් වහගෙන දැකපු හින හැබැයි කරන්න youth එකට නියමෙට set වෙන්න friendship එක මෙන්න.
The all-new NSB Ithru account, NSB IM, a plan for your dream.
Business News, sponsored by National Savings Bank, the safest place for your money.
Google has had to publicly state Gmail is here to stay after a hoax claiming it was shutting down spread widely on social media. A post on X, formerly Twitter, which has been viewed more than 7 million times, claimed it would be closing in August. Google took to the platform to rebuff the false claim. A communications expert told it was a classic example of the dangers of misinformation. That's on Business News.
Business News, sponsored by National Savings Bank, the safest place for your money.
Go ekak tiyana youth එකට life එකේ change එකට නියමෙට set වෙන්න ඇස් වහගෙන දැකපු හින හැබැයි කරන්න youth එකට නියමෙට set වෙන්න friendship එක මෙන්න.
The all-new NSB Ithru account, NSB IM, a plan for your dream.
And on economic news, the lowest prices of vegetables have been recorded yesterday after 6 months, according to the prices released by the Dambulla Special Economic Centre. The wholesale price of a kilo of carrot has dropped to 310 rupees, and the price of red onions has scaled down to 230 rupees per kilo. The price of white onion has been reduced to 530 rupees per kilo. A kilo of cabbage has seen a significant drop in price to 300 rupees. Price of brinjal has declined to 135 rupees per kilo, leeks selling at 190 rupees per kilo, tomatoes sold at 420 rupees a kilo of radish sold at 50 rupees, cucumber at 100 rupees per kilo, and imported potatoes sold at a massive dropped price of 110 rupees per kilo.
Weather report.
Several spells of showers will occur in eastern Uva and north-central provinces and in Nuwara and Matale districts. Showers or thunder showers may occur at several places in western and Sabaragamu provinces and in Kandigol and Matare districts in the evening or night. Fairly strong winds, about 30 to 40 kilometers per hour, can be expected at times in eastern slopes of the central hills and in northern, north-central, northwestern, southern, Uva and eastern provinces. That's the weather update. Before we wind up the bulletin of news, back to the headlines. Loan lifeline values at 20 billion will be given for small and medium entrepreneurs. 200 electric buses to Western Province. The UNFPA Regional Director to visit Sri Lanka today. Amendments to Parate Execution Law in Parliament soon. Former Finance Minister Ronnie DeMille passes away. Foreign news, NATO allies reject Emmanuel Macron's idea of troops to Ukraine. With that, we conclude the morning bulletin of news, and it's back to Anupama to give you some good company.